Hello and welcome back to my channel. My name is Shamir Rahib and today I want to talk about lenses, specifically the Canon RF 1535mm f2.8L USM versus the Canon EF 1635mm f2.8L USM Mark III. Before we begin, let me just set up the context for today's video quickly. I have had the intention of getting an ultra-wide angle lens for quite a while now. The widest focal length I have in my kit is 24mm on my EF 2470. It is a good lens, but nevertheless, I do come across multiple occasions from my part-time job as a wedding photographer that I wish I had an ultra-wide angle lens, specifically the EF 1635mm, so that I can take this scene to the next level. But now that I have migrated to an RF system, where the two camera bodies that I own now are the EOS R and EOS RP, I basically have an additional option available to me, which is the RF 1535. Another thing to take note is that I am actually looking into purchasing a second-hand lens, if possible. So, today's video is basically the thought process that goes on in my head in choosing between these two lenses. Will I get the EF 1635 or will I save up and wait till a second-hand RF 1535 is available, or probably buy a new RF lens instead? Please take note that these two lenses are not mine and I'm only borrowing them for the sake of testing them out. Now you understand the context, let's dive into the analysis. As you all know, the specs for camera bodies and lenses can be pretty wild. That is why I always say that it is important for us to look at this objectively. The first thing I would do is I will question myself. Why am I getting this lens? What do I have now that is stopping me from achieving those goals? So, I made myself a list. The purpose why I'm getting an ultra-wide angle lens are: number one, taking group photos in a tight space. Number two, for Chinese wedding, they will have a session called a tea ceremony where the couple will have to serve tea to their elderly. On one side you have the couple and on the other side you have the elders, all facing each other. As a photographer, I need to be in between and capture all the faces in one shot. The third would be toasting ceremony, or the Chinese folk call it yam seng. Then I would like to have it for my vlogging. Wider angle means I don't have to extend my arm further, which means less taxing to my arm. Okay, with those objectives in mind, let's go through the comparisons. Number one, the price. According to Canon Malaysia's website, the price for the new EF 1635mm is 10,049 ringgit, whereas the RF 1535mm is about 10,219 ringgit. That is a pretty small difference. Then I tried searching for these lenses in Lazada because the prices are more recent. Surprisingly, you can get the Canon EF 1635mm for only 9,021 and the Canon RF 1535 for 8,866. As I mentioned earlier, I prefer to purchase a second-hand lens. I tried searching for these lenses through second-hand websites like Mudah.my and Carousel. Unfortunately, these lenses are pretty rare, especially the RF version. The EF 1635 predecessor, however, is pretty common, which is the Mark I and Mark II. The Mark II has an average price of 2,900 ringgit. The Mark III will probably be around 5,000-ish, I think. And I also think that it's going to take some time for the RF version to appear in second-hand market because they are relatively new. Okay, let's move on to the design. Both EF and RF almost have the same footprint in terms of physical size. They both use 82mm filter threads. And for the weight, there isn't any noticeable difference between the weight. If I'm being picky, I feel like the EF 1635 is a bit lighter than the RF version. Okay, on the EF 16-35, you have the zoom ring, the focusing ring, and the autofocus switch. On the RF, you have an additional two items on them, which is the control ring and also an IS image stabilization switch. Now look at this. On the RF lens, when I zoom out to 15mm, the barrel erected. You don't see this behavior on the 1635. No matter at what focal length you're at, it's still the same size. This feels kind of counterintuitive. It is just like my EF 2470. When zoomed out, it erected. When zoomed in, it goes back in. It just feels weird. But over time, I have come to accept its funky behavior, so it doesn't strike me as a negative impression. The zoom ring on the RF is wider than on the EF, so I feel like it's convenient to have the most important adjuster on the lens easily accessible. But what I don't like is having the focus ring right after the zoom ring. If I were to look through the viewfinder and just use my fingers to adjust the lens, if I'm on manual focus mode, then this could be a problem. I may accidentally change the focus if I was trying to actually change the zoom. The control ring is located at the top or at the furthest end of the barrel. For big hands like mine, I don't find it a problem to reach it. I think it's just nicely placed. But ever since I migrated to EOS R, I have been stuck with my EF 2470, and I have not familiarized myself in using the control ring. Everything that I needed to change, I can change the settings via the customizable buttons on the body. I think that's why I love Canon, because everything is well thought of. So, how sharp are they? Look at these images. Okay, so let's compare between EF 16mm at aperture of f2.8 versus the RF at 50mm f2.8. At the center of the image, both lenses produces, I would say, identical images. They both have the same sharpness. Let's go in closer. So I have the EF on the left and the RF output on the right. Okay, now moving on to the side. I think that at f2.8 they are pretty much the same on both lenses. Now let's look through at f8, because most lenses sweet spot is at f8. So again, let's start in the middle. So from here, it's sharper than the previous one. On both lenses, they are identical. Now let's move to the side. You can see that the RF lens produced a sharper image as the image as it goes to the corner. I feel like the RF lens has more contrast. Let's make a comparison between EF at f22 versus RF at f22. So at the smallest aperture, you can see that the image is not as sharp as it was in f8. I feel like the RF produces a more contrasty image than the EF overall. So this is at their widest angle. Okay, let's make a comparison between EF at 35mm versus the RF 35mm. Let's start with an aperture of f2.8. So on the left side I have the EF version, and on the right side I have the RF version. At 35mm, I think that the RF is producing sharper image. Now let's go to the side. So you can see the side here on the RF, it's way sharper than the one on the EF lens. Now let's compare at f8. Start in the middle. Both lenses produce almost identical sharpness at the center part of the image. Moving on to the side, the RF has a slight advantage. It produces slightly sharper image than the EF. If you can see over here. Now let's look at how the 15mm on the RF looks like compared to 16mm on the EF. For this comparison, let's compare these two images. So at EF 16mm versus the RF 15mm. Let's start from the middle. So let's use this line in between the two doors as a starting point. You can see that on both EF and RF, the line is at the center of the image. But right off the bat, you can see that on the EF, this kid's head is slightly larger than the RF. I think this is the zoom effect of a 16mm versus the 15mm on the RF. Now as we go to the side, look here. So on the RF, you can see that on this window, you can see these 3 iron bars, but you do not see them on the EF lens. Okay, over here you can see that on the EF, it barely touches the window, whereas on the RF, you can see the iron bars, you can see the window, and on the left side, so on the left side, you can also see this blue wall, whereas on the EF, it just ended on this line over here. So in terms of number, or in terms of percentage, how does this 1mm represent? To figure that out, let's try to crop this image as what we observe on the EF. So for that, I'm gonna hit crop, remain the aspect ratio. Just gonna bring this down a little bit, about there maybe. Okay. Okay, so this is what we've seen on the EF. Now that we have this image that look as the EF version, let's go to the metadata and bring up the calculator. So the original image size is 6240 pixels minus width. The crop pixel is 5825. So that is 415 pixel difference. In terms of percentage, that would be, we need to divide by 6240, multiply by 100, and we get 6.65% difference. What this means is that 1mm difference between RF15 and the EF16 produces almost 7% difference. Now, let's move on to image stabilization performance. So for this comparison, let's first go through image stabilization for the purpose of taking photos. Here I have two images taken with RF and also with EF lenses. So on the left side we have the RF output image, and on the right side we have an EF output image. On the RF we have the image stabilization turned on, whereas on the EF lens, since there is no image stabilization, so we leave it as it is. Now when we zoom in, now you can see a clear difference what does that image stabilization does. And I shot this image at 0.8 second shutter speed. Since Canon claims that the image stabilization works with 5 stop of shutter speed. Now the rule of thumb, when we want to get a sharp image, is we need to shoot at a shutter speed of 1 over double the focal length. Now let's take EF version. The widest is 16 millimeter. So 1 over double of 16 is 1 over 32. But we don't have 1 over 32 of a second. What we have is 1 over 40. So 5 stops is 1 over 20, 1 over 10, 1 over 5.4 second, and 0.8 second. So that is why I'm shooting this at 0.8 second handheld. So with the image stabilization turned on, you can see that although it's not sharp, but it's stable. As opposed to EF with no image stabilization, it's just a mess. Okay, so what about the image stabilization for vlogging or for videography? So what I did was I took the camera, I took the lens, and I hold out the camera and just shoot myself vlogging style with a variations of either turning the image stabilization on the lens for the RF on, and also testing it out with the enhanced digital stabilizer. Also switching to the EF 1635, I did the same thing. I turned off the enhanced digital stabilizer, and I also tested out with an enhanced digital stabilizer. So let's go through the videos that I have. Okay, so now I am with my Canon EF 1635mm on this camera, and I have my stabilizer turned off, the enhanced digital stabilizer turned off on this one right now. You can see there's a lot of shaky images there. Okay, now I have the Canon EF 1635mm on this camera, and I turn on the enhanced digital stabilizer. All right. I don't really like the, I don't know, there's some sort of fuzziness whenever I take a step. There's just something is going on. Look at this. You see this? So whenever I take a step, then it goes like buzz, 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 buzz. I don't know what this is, but it's it's annoying. Okay, now let's try this one. Now I'm testing the RF 1535 with just the image stabilizer on the lens being turned on. As you can see there, it's doing quite a decent job in stabilizing the footage. Honestly, I think that it's still shaky, but it is not as bad as it was with the EF 1635 without any stabilization on. Okay, right now I have my Canon RF 1535mm on this camera with both image stabilizer on the lens and also the enhanced digital stabilizer turned on. There is this, I don't know what it was, but the images just goes around buzzing around. There's a lot of fuzziness in it. I don't know what that is, but I really don't like that. Okay, so for the image stabilization for videography, I wouldn't say it's doing a perfect job for vlogging. I think that if you want a better result, you're still gonna need to use a dedicated stabilizer like the DJI Ronin or such, but that doesn't mean without them you cannot shoot. The image stabilization built in can still help you, especially if you're doing just a simple vlogging. So from my findings, it seems like the RF lens has the upper hand in almost all categories. With the small price margin between EF and RF, it's a no-brainer for you to choose the RF when you can't use it. Why wouldn't you get the RF? Well, again, let's look at this realistically and objectively. My goal is to get a second-hand lens that fulfills my requirements. So I'm the kind of person that sets my own rule. when purchasing a second-hand equipment, it should be 55% or less than the cost of a new unit. Negotiable to 60 to 65% if the item is relatively new. Anything beyond that, I might as well save up and get a new unit. So, how do I process this information? Now, let's say if I can find the EF 1635mm Mark III in the second-hand market for about 55% of the original cost, I might take it considering it fits all my use cases. My question now is it worth it to spend 45% extra for a new RF 1535mm? So for me personally, the answer is yes. The RF lens are slightly sharper than the EF, especially on the side. The RF gave me 6% wider shot. Moments like tea ceremony can be shot easily with this lens. The image stabilization also helps me with vlogging. So instead of using stabilizer like the DJI Ronin RSC2, I can just use it handheld. Then I don't have to carry a stabilizer around just for the sake of doing a simple vlog. I'm going to stress on the word simple vlog. Okay. The control ring is just a bonus for me. All that plus a new warranty, it is definitely a good deal. What if I still have EF camera bodies as backup? Then I would say go for the EF 1635mm because you can use it on both RF and EF bodies. But if I'm being completely honest with you, personally, I would have traded the EF body for at least a new EOS RP. Because I feel like the EOS RP is an underrated camera. It is actually a very, very good camera. Right? Then I save up more and just grab the 1535mm. Well then, I hope this video is able to give you some insights or perhaps assist you in your decision-making process. Before I leave, I want to give a huge shout out and say thank you to Canon Malaysia for lending me this Canon RF 1535mm lens. It is an awesome lens. I really love testing out this lens. I really wish I had more time with it. So perhaps Canon, do lend me this again. I also like to thank my friend CJ Tan for helping me out in the making of this video. He is a phenomenal videographer. Go check him out on his channel or profile. I'm going to share it with you somewhere, I don't know, as soon as I can figure it out how to do so. If not, I will just put it in the description below. Last but not least, please tell me in the comments section below which among these two lenses is your favorite and why. Also, don't forget to subscribe to my YouTube channel to see more photography related contents. With that, I rest my case. Peace.